All right. So we can retrieve data from an endpoint, a web service endpoint, and we can render it here. Right? So what I'd like to be able to do is also generate data, new users. I'd like to be able to type in username, password, first name, and last name, and send it over to the server. Right? So let's do that. What we can do is to listen for an incoming create button click. So we could do that on the client side. We can say grab that button. Maybe we should give it a name. We can give it an ID and call it create user. And from jQuery we can grab that. We can say grab var create user. Actually, we don't even need to do that. We can just grab that ID. So it'll be hash create user. And I'm going to declare a click event handler and say, if there's a click, I want you to call the following function, create user, which doesn't exist yet. Okay? And that create user is going to be right here. It's going to be function create user, and here we're going to just say console log create user, just to make sure that the click event has been declared. Right? So let's try it out. So let's refresh here, and in the console, if we look at the console and we click on create, notice that it is printing out create user. So the click is actually running that function. Excellent. So what I'd like to be able to do in this create function is we need to grab all these elements, all these input fields. Right? So let's grab them. Right? So this would be ID. And this will be username, the username field. This will be maybe the ID password field. And this will be the ID, this is a first name field. Can't type. And this will be the last name field. Notice that the browsers already, the IDE is complaining that the IDEs were the same. All right, we have those. We're going to fetch those. Let's grab all these objects and say var the username will be grab me the element whose ID is username field, and I want you to grab me the value of that input field. Okay, and the same thing with each one of these. So this will be password, this will be first name, and this will be last name. And this will be password, first name, last name, each one of these, right? And we're going to build a user object, right, that we can send over as an HTTP request, right? And the fields are going to be username, password, and first name. So username has the value username, the password has the value password, the first name has the value first name, and the last name has the value last name. So we created an object locally. It's in the format, the JSON format, JavaScript object notation, and we just need to now send it over to the server, right, for rendering, for storage. Okay. So let's do that. We can use fetch again. We can use fetch, and we can say, I want you to send this over to the same URL. And you might say, wait a minute, we're going to use the same URL for both things, for getting and sending? Actually, not quite. What we're going to do is that this one, by default, fetch generates a get. That's the default behavior. If you want to send something, if you want to do something else, you need to explicitly say, no, I want something else. I want the method not to be get. Instead, I want it to be post. I want to send a post, right, to that same URL. Okay, and I want you to send in the body, as part of the body of the HTTP request that you're sending over, I want you to send the following string. I want you to convert this JSON object to a string representation. Okay, because that we have to, everything has to be converted into a string when it's sent over on the wire. Okay, so to do that, there is a function in the JSON library that stringifies, converts into a string any object that you give it. The user object is being stringified. Okay, Plus, we need a couple headers. One of them is content type, I think it's called. And the type is that I want the server to know that this is the format of this data is JSON format, right? So the browser knows it's not text, it's not HTML, right? I'm not uploading a file, right? It's JSON, right? And I think it's application JSON. All right, so let's see. Let's look at that. Let's refresh. Let's put maybe a breakpoint in the. Make this a little smaller. We'll put a breakpoint right here, and let's do. So we want to Charlie, right? Charlie. So whatever. Create. Okay, so if we look at the user object, now it has been correctly populated, and we're about to send a post. And let's see if this blows up. Let's do a go, and something went wrong. Let's see what the console says. It says post, blah, 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 blah. Network, let's see what the network says. It tried to post, right? This is what it sent. This is what it sent. Let's see, it sent a post. I got a 4 or 5 back. The payload was correct. In the request headers, notice that the content type is correct. So we sent the correct thing, right? But the server says, I have a get for API user, but I don't have a post for API user. You know, I need a somehow I'm not listening to that. Instead, it responded saying, method not allowed, right? I can receive a get, but I can't receive a post, right? So let's go back to the server and try to add that. So let's go back to the server side. And here we can create a mapping and say that we want to do a post mapping. We're going to map to the same API/user. The only difference between these two is that one is a post and one is a get. That's how the server tells them apart, right? Because it's the same URL. See that? But it tells them apart because it's a different method. Yes? So let's load that. Import, and we'll do a public, and we're going to return the user object that we're going to create. We're going to say create user. Notice I'm using the same exact naming convention from the client so that I can keep it straight in my head. And this is going to have to parse the JSON from the body of the HTTP request. So for that we're going to say, so here's the user object, right? We're going to parse that from the request body. There it is. I'm going to parse it from the request body, and it's going to convert it into an object instance. And then we're going to use the repository, and we're going to use the save function. The save function is going to generate an insert into a database. And so we're going to just pass in the user object, and it's going to return the actual user that was added, right? The user instance, right? So that it will have, for instance, the ID that we're not providing. We're not providing the ID. It will create it, insert it, and then it'll have an ID. Right? And that's what it's going to return. And let's see. All right, there we go. Let's try it out. We'll restart the server. And we can now hopefully come back here. Let's do a refresh. Okay, it's rendering. And let's add Charlie. Let's make this a little smaller. Garcia, and let's do a create. It comes back. Let's do a go. Okay, I didn't get any errors. Let's see what the console says. Let's see what the network says. The network, it went to the user, notice that it didn't complain, and the response, notice that the response, we have the ID there. See that? It was actually inserted, but notice that our user interface was not loaded. If we refresh, notice that Charlie indeed was added to the database. Okay. Obviously, we would have to tweak it so that we can listen for the callback. When it comes back from the server, we would re-render, right, so that we would refresh this content, or just or maybe cache it and add it as the last row, right, just to show and some feedback that indeed the post was successful. Okay. All right. Excellent. Right. So we were able to do a get. Right. We were able to do a post, create users, find them all. We created the web service endpoints, the data model, right, the repository, and the database to host that data. I hope that was useful, and thank you.